there are still disparities in ASD identification. So I'm just going to put a pin in everyone's celebration. So the most well-known disparity is the sex disparity. So research has consistently shown that females are 4 times, on average, 4 times less likely to be identified with autism than males. So there are several different theories about why this is the case. A lot of it boils down to we currently have a male-centric diagnostic criteria, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then research also shows that for autistic females, they engage in higher rates of masking or camouflaging behaviors. And so they're able to kind of blend in, look more socially adept than autistic males. And so that may partly be why they're getting missed. So another disparity that exists that people may not know about is research consistently shows that Black kids who are identified with autism are more likely to be identified with autism and co-occurring intellectual disability. So this data is from the 2020 surveillance year of the ADAM network, and as you can see, 50% of Black kids who had cognitive data in their records and were autistic had intellectual disability. And this is something that is consistently shown in research, and we don't understand this.
Is it unmuted? Okay. Making sure that Black females get the appropriate diagnosis and services that they need. So, what do we know about autism in Black women? Spoiler alert, nothing. Absolutely nothing. So, there was a scoping review done that looked at research from 1943 until 2020 that focused on the experiences of Black autistic girls and women. And so from that search, they extracted a whopping 14 publications. 77 years, 14 publications. Of those 14, 6 were monitoring studies. 1 was talking about developmental disabilities broadly. And then 4 studies either only looked at race or sex, so it didn't take an intersectional approach. So we got 3 studies in a 77-year period that feature the experiences of Black autistic females and use an intersectional framework. And it gets even better. So these 3 studies were all case studies, and only 1 of them was conducted in the United States. So that's why I said we don't know anything about autism in Black women. There are some more recent papers that are being published, but those papers are basically just like calls for action. So they're basically just saying like, hey, there are no Black autistic females in research studies. We need to do something about it. So if any of you in your spare time want to do a lit review, I'm just going to give you a heads up. You're not going to find anything. So for me, when I and other people and colleagues, I have to turn to social media to find out things about autism in Black females. So there are a lot of blogs and Facebook groups and Instagram hashtags and just all the things around Black autistic females. I think there's one more. So we're going to talk about this for Black women and girls who aren't autistic enough, because a lot of Black women and girls have to self-identify as autistic. So, what do we know? And then this again is coming from me diving into social media because there's literally nothing from a peer review perspective. So, like I just mentioned, Black autistic females are more likely to self-identify, self-diagnose as autistic. And part of this is because of like barriers that affect a lot of people when they're seeking an autism evaluation. But for adults in particular, because there's a really big emphasis on early identification, there aren't really a lot of people, A, who work with adults, autistic adults, and then B, who are competent to do autism assessments for adults. So sometimes it's because they have limited or no access to a specialist. Sometimes it's cost, like with other people. The other thing that is interesting isn't the right word, but it comes up a lot in social media is, like that title I showed y'all on the last slide, is they are told that they are quirky, but they fail to meet autism, the current diagnostic criteria. So there's a problem with that, and we're going to talk about it in a second. But you see a lot of like, I'm not autistic enough per the current diagnostic criteria. And then another thing that I noticed from social media, but also just friends and colleagues, if a Black woman gets a diagnosis, it's often later in life. And usually it's because they have gone through an autism evaluation for their own child or children. And then it comes out like, oh, my kid is very similar to me. So like, let's see what's going on here. But we know that a late or missed autism identification is associated with a host of negative outcomes. So anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. So it is really important that we identify Black females as early as possible. So to sum up what we know about Black autistic females, so this is a quote from a really great article called "They Don't Know, Don't Show, or Don't Care, Autism's White Privilege Problem." So I trimmed a part of this, but it says, when I, as a Black person, as a woman, as an autistic adult, as the mother of Black autistic children, as an advocate, think about the world of autism research and policies, either they, or should I say you all, do not know, or do not care about Black, Indigenous, people of color very much. So the piece that I cut out is "They don't know, don't show, or don't care" is from a movie called Boys in the Hood, and a character called Doughboy basically says they don't know, don't show, or don't care about people in the hood. So she framed this quote from a Black autistic perspective. And if you haven't seen this article, I definitely suggest you read it. It is enlightening. So now on to the meat of the topic. So when we're doing autism assessments for Black females, what are some things we should consider? So first, we need to understand our limitations. Most of what we currently know about autism is based on research that was done in the West with predominantly white male samples. So earlier I mentioned this male-centric diagnostic criteria. That's why we say that, because as from the sex disparities, there are a lot more males, especially white males, who are identified with autism. They are who the research samples are tapping into. So we have to think about our diagnostic criteria and our diagnostic tools, knowing that the samples aren't that diverse, they aren't really representative. So there has been research done looking at sex differences in the diagnostic criteria for autism. And so compared to boys, girls are more likely to have better functional social behavior. be better at reciprocal conversations, especially around topics of interest, be better at sharing their interests with others, integrating verbal and nonverbal behaviors. They are better at using expressive nonverbals than autistic boys, but not better or equal to non-autistic girls. So that is a strength, but it's still a bit atypical. This make eye contact, I should have put an asterisk there. So some autistic girls are good at modulating their eye contact appropriately for social interactions, but it comes at a cost. So if you ask someone who seems pretty good at making eye contact, they don't like it, it's effortful. And so on the surface level, you might see like, oh, hey, this girl's making eye contact. So we're going to X off that box in the criteria, but it's coming at a cost. And then for relationships, girls typically are better at initiating friendships, but it's the maintenance of those friendships that you see the difference is. That's where the difficulty lies for them. And then for the restricted and repetitive patterns of behaviors, interests, and activities, girls tend to have fewer and more subtle RRBs, and they tend to be more socially appropriate, like reading, arts, animals is a big one. And then they tend to be internalizers and are really big on perfectionism. And again, the interests tend to be typical, but they're really intense. So they are really into art, and the perfectionism comes in. They're erasing, redrawing. Animals, they can give you all the facts about animals. And if any of you have ever done the ADOS and you do Tuesday, I have had a lot of conversations about, is that a frog versus a toad? And something about the cover of the eyes. And I was just like, oh, I did not know that. So, you learn things. So those are sex differences that have been found in the diagnostic criteria. When we think about culture, so research shows that, again, autism is observed across cultures, and then the two broad domains of the diagnostic criteria are found across cultures, but the way that these symptoms manifest, just like girls, is different. So there is often cultural variation in how these symptoms manifest. And so in the DSM, those subdomains, social reciprocity, and the exemplars that are given, sometimes people are rigid in, like, these are all the only things that tap into that, but there's more. Those are just examples. And so how that looks varies across culture. So some qualitative differences, for example, eye contact, we know that there's a lot of cultural variation in what is appropriate eye contact. So in some cultures, it's disrespectful to look an adult in the eye. So we have to keep that in mind when we're doing evaluations. And then there are also quantitative differences. So like stereotype motor movements. Research shows that white boys are more likely to engage in stereotype motor movements, like hand flapping, than children of other races and ethnicities. The other thing that we need to keep in mind is, so for a diagnosis of autism, the differences have to cause some type of functional impairment. So if you have a girl who is good at masking or camouflaging, on the surface, it doesn't look like there's any functional impairment. But because of how much it takes to engage in those behaviors, then you can see an increase in depression, anxiety, suicidality. That is functional impairment. And then also, context matters. So if you have a little black girl who can entertain herself in play, doesn't need an adult involved in her play, that can be really ideal and desirable in a family. If a caregiver is like, hey, I can leave her to her own devices and she's fine, especially if there are other kids who require more attention from parents. Then a parent isn't going to come to your office and say like, hey, she spends a lot of time playing by herself. Like that's, they like that. So just keeping that in mind. And then for our diagnostic tools, I'm just going to focus on the ADOS and the ADIR because those are our two gold standard measures of autism. So research has shown that girls perform differently in the ADOS. So they have better pretend play skills. So in the make-believe activity, birthday party activity, they look better, do better. And then also some girls are better at integrating verbal and nonverbal communication. So for the demonstration task, when you have the kid showing and telling you how they brush their teeth, they may perform better at that task than autistic boys. And then for the ADIR, parents will report that autistic girls are more expressive. And then again, we have the pretend play, like I mentioned earlier, less RRBs. And then because their interests are more typical, less noticeable preoccupations. And there was a recent study looking at differential item functioning across the ADOS-2 modules. And so this study found that 8 items had significant differential test functioning for race. And so 6 of the 8 items were related to social affect, and 6 of the 8 items had greater difficulty and poor discrimination in Black children compared to white children. But the effect sizes were small, so we can't say that these items on the ADOS are driving like under identification of Black kids, but it is important to note that these items aren't always functioning the same across race and culture. So, knowing all of this, what can we do? So it is really important that we take the time to reflect on our own cultural lens and then check our biases throughout the assessment process and challenge our assumptions. So I pulled this table from, this article is for school psychologists, but I think these are great questions. So taking the time to think about like, when a little Black kid comes into my office, what are some of those automatic thoughts or assumptions that I hold about either this kid or this family? Am I thinking about the problem from all potential angles? Am I making sure that I'm thinking about the ways culture is impacting what I'm seeing? Things like that. Something that is really important but can kind of get lowered on the list of things to do, making sure we, as much as possible, establish trust and rapport. The evaluation process is strange, like it's not a pleasant process. I don't think anyone is ever like, yay, I'm going to get an evaluation. And then for Black females in particular, so again, this intersectionality, they're Black, so there is a history of just like mistrust, distrust, just medical things in the Black community that have not been great. And then they're female, and we know that females can be less likely to be heard than men. I had to think about a good way to say that. And so making sure that our families are heard, knowing that they're coming in with these things historically and then also personal experiences. And for autism, it's really important that we get a thorough developmental history and information about their current functioning. The way that we ask questions is really important, so we need to be flexible in our approach. So like the ADIR has structured ways that you ask questions, but being flexible to rephrase things so that you are getting as much qualitative information as possible to support a diagnosis of autism, because different questions mean different things for parents, and trying to frame things in a way that's understandable and can elicit like some examples. So, oh, when you say it like that, or now that you say it like that, my child does X. Also, do not rely on a high score on the ADOS or the ADIR. I don't even score my ADOSs like total score anymore. The ADOS is just one piece of information that we're using in the autism evaluation. And so if you give an ADOS and then you score it and you're like, oh, they don't meet the cutoff, so there goes their autism diagnosis, you're potentially doing a disservice, because there may be quite a bit of qualitative information in that observation that just isn't getting captured fully by the numbers that we're using. So just some questions to think about when we're doing an autism evaluation for a Black female. So think about the quality and intensity of behaviors. So facial expressions is a big one, because I see a lot of girls, and some of them can be flat, like you might expect for autism, but some of them are really expressive, but it's the quality of those facial expressions. So they tend to be very exaggerated, almost theatrical. And so if you don't see them emoting in the session, but you ask a caregiver about it, and they're like, oh, yeah, they show a range of facial expressions, I always follow up with, so what do those facial expressions look like? Can they sometimes be exaggerated? And a lot of times it's, yeah, they are. They are exaggerated. And then for routines, like let's say we have a little Black girl who has a bedtime routine, and for the family it's great because she can put herself to bed. So, like, yeah, you're asking about routines, difficulties, adapting, and it's like, oh no, she has a bedtime routine, but it's fine. I always will ask, has there ever been a time where she couldn't do the routine or it's been disrupted? And usually what will happen is the family is accommodating, so they're making sure that they can get through the routine, because they know if they don't, then it's going to be some problematic behavior at home. Or they're like, no, there hasn't been a time, but you can ask them, so what about other things you've noticed they seem to need to do a certain way, or other people to do a certain way, to try to tap into some of those differences in intensity. And then for Black females, asking about how much effort it takes for them to socialize. So we know females tend to mask more, camouflage more. So just asking if it's developmentally appropriate, asking like, how do you feel after you socialize? Because if that girl or that woman says, I need to be alone for the next day, then that's functional impairment, and that's giving you information about, yes, they are doing some of these socially appropriate behaviors, but it is taking a toll. Like, it is a performance, basically, for them to get through these situations in a way that makes them look like they are neurotypical. Eye contact, I think I mentioned this earlier, is the one that I'll ask about. For eye contact, you also can get where it's not modulated appropriately, so they stare. So you can also like comment and ask about that too, because if you haven't had someone stare at you, it is quite the experience. It makes you really uncomfortable. So asking about that. You usually get like, well, I was told I need to make eye contact. And so it's like, okay, noted. We got to work on that though. And then for the functional impairment piece, trying to get a sense of, in the home setting, if these things aren't causing any functional impairment, what's happening at school. So sometimes kids will hold it together at school, and then when they get home, that's their safe space. So then they go to their room, they're in their rooms until it's dinner time. Like, they don't have the capacity to do anything else because they have spent the majority of their day trying to blend in with everyone else, and it's taking a toll on them. Also, like I mentioned earlier, for those routines and other behaviors that caregivers aren't necessarily reporting, asking about their functioning in different situations to see if you can get some more examples about if they're engaging in some of these behaviors, and if they're prevented from doing certain behaviors, what does that look like? So, key takeaways. The core features of autism are culturally defined, and they vary across cultures. So we know that disparities in autism identification exist for Black females, and that leads to disparities in outcomes, and that, my friends, is a social injustice. And so we, as psychologists and clinicians, have opportunities to improve identification and outcomes for Black autistic females. And so I hope I went through this fast because I want y'all to stay on time today. But I hope that this was helpful in thinking about ways that we can tailor our assessments to make sure that we aren't missing some of the Black autistic females that come through our clinics. And then I have some resources. So this first resource is a chart that has the autism diagnostic criteria, and it has like basically the stereotypical thinking behind a criteria. Like, eye contact typically is thought of as a lack of eye contact, but then more nuanced or more subtle ways of thinking about it. So like, it's poorly modulated, or they're staring, or it's effortful for the person. And then the next two, the Color of Autism and Autism in Black, are two organizations that really focus on assisting caregivers and Black autistic youth, building community, because that can be really hard. And then just other resources for families and Black youth. And then we got resources, and then any questions folks have. Oh. Thank you.
Have you noticed when you're doing assessment that some of the publication for girls maybe show more than boys is like a frozen, almost like a fight or flight of the freeze, where some of it is like that sympathetic nervous system response where they lock down not knowing what to do.
Yep.
And that gets missed because that's not in the criteria either. And I don't know if that would be considered just like a female response of like, I'm pausing and I'm stuck there. Are you seeing?
That
feels like one of the things I see.
Yeah, I see that a lot. And so usually they get diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. And when you look more or you ask more questions, it's more than like a fear of embarrassment or judgment. I literally don't know what to do in these situations. And I've had lots of girls tell me like, oh God, if someone I don't know approaches me, like, that's the worst thing ever. I'm just going to walk away. I'm going to stand there because I don't know what to do. Like, I have these scripts for introducing myself or having a conversation, but the deviation from that is too much. And so you're right, they're freezing and avoiding. And in the school setting, if they're quiet, not really interacting with their peers, the teachers typically aren't going to complain about that because they're getting their work done. So it takes more like non-ASD symptoms to bring them to the threshold of their caregivers seeking an answer, because they're either really, really anxious or they're depressed, because going through their day is really hard because, like school, there are the social demands and they can't deal with it. But usually they get an anxiety diagnosis, and then we do some more digging, and it's like, yeah, there's anxiety there, but there's also autism there too. That's a good question.
I know you said there's basically zero in research on this, and so, based on your experience and knowledge and kind of what you feel like in your expertise, what are the long-term consequences for this, like this non-identification?
It's the mental health of Black women is like, there's a lot that goes into there. And so not having the label, even for themselves to better understand, like, hey, this is a part of who I am. Then you have all these like anxiety diagnoses or depression or suicidality, and they aren't sure like what's driving it. And so you see an increase in these other mental health concerns and higher suicide attempts. Just a lot of negative things associated with that, which is really sad and problematic.
Just to come in, I don't see children anymore, but in terms of autism in adult, like females, I'm wondering how many could be misdiagnosed or psychotic.
Yes.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yes.
And I may have overlooked something in assessing like females because like females have to carry on,
Yes.
take on so much,
Yeah.
have to adapt to so much in their environment. It's just really causing me to reflect on in the past. If I had missed something as a psychotic disorder, it may have been autism.
Yeah, there's, I don't know if any of you are familiar with her. Her name is Joy Johnson. She is a BCBA. She's a Black woman. She's also autistic. She had a running list of diagnoses, including schizophrenia, I think. And then after like incarcerations and just all of these things, eventually got a diagnosis of autism. So it definitely happens.
Now, is that a citation that you can share?
It's not in this one, but I can send. Let me see what her. I think it might be.
And are we getting these slides? Okay. I haven't had a chance. I've been babysitting.
How dare you? Are there any online questions that we know about? Okay.
So her website is joyfjohnson.com, and I can email it to. Let's see.
Question, does it make any difference whether the evaluator is a male or female in those diagnoses, Black men? Everyone looks at that.
Depending on the person, probably. Like we get some patients who are more comfortable with females versus males. So I think there isn't a hard and fast rule, but it will depend on the person you're assessing.
Comment. It's really encouraging to see people progressing in terms of being able to more active identify disorders. Because in the 60s, some time ago, my research with children with attention deficits, we call them MBDs, minimal brain damage. So we've progressed because of more ongoing research like this, curiosity.
Thank you. This is her website. Let me see. But her story, yes, Joy Johnson, her story is very interesting. She had a running list of diagnoses.
Was there a girl like length of time differ between like a child getting tested versus an adult who realizes they might have autism and wants testing?
Yes, it definitely can, because for adults, you still need that developmental history. And so sometimes the caregiver relationship with the adult isn't great. And so there's like concerns about, having the caregiver come in. Sometimes the caregiver isn't a reliable source of information, so you need to try to think of who can provide some of that earlier information. And then what I noticed, because I like to see older kids, like adolescents and adults, is because they have gone undiagnosed for so long, they get these running lists of diagnoses, or because they don't have an answer to their question, they have all these internalizing symptoms and other issues, and so you're spending a lot of time thinking not only about, is this autism, but is this autism and depression, autism and anxiety, autism and ADHD, whatever. And yes.
Right, so that's kind of one of the things I was thinking about as part of the negative outcomes that you were sharing. And I'm wondering if possibly one of those negative outcomes is that research that you were saying in the beginning about the intellectual disability. If they're not being identified early on, then they're not receiving those resources to help. And is that just a negative outcome because they're not getting the resources? And it just was something I thought of. I didn't know if that was something that had been kind of bantered about regarding it. Because you said that was a pretty large research that continues to happen.
Yeah. So I haven't seen a study looking at the effects of delayed diagnosis for Black females in particular, but there are some studies looking at delayed and misdiagnosis, and it consistently shows like these either misdiagnoses or these diagnoses with other things. So it is detrimental to one's mental health.
And I'm just thinking that also whatever medication and they're receiving that isn't being beneficial because it's not addressing what the concern is.
Yeah.
Thank you. So,
I'm just going to say that Christina's going to pass around the QR code to check out. You may also receive an email, and you can click on the link. Okay,
yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Dr. Hill. That was amazing. I feel like we learned so much, and I want to bring you back and have you teach us more. So you have opened up a Pandora's box for yourself.
Okay.
Are you sticking around, or are you going back to
I'm
Fayetteville?
gonna go. No, not
No.
Not.
Are you gonna head to?
I'm gonna head to work because I got, unfortunately, things that I got to finish.
Of course you do.
Procrastinate.
Thank you. Well, we will be getting in touch with you.
Please be in touch.
And I just want to introduce to you today, as an ArPA member, your lobbyists. This is Mr. Randy Thurman, who was a member of the Arkansas House of Representatives from 1989 to 1994, serving in the area around my favorite part of Arkansas, Heber Springs, near Gooseberry Lake. Mr. Thurman has a bachelor's degree in political science from UCA, a master's in public administration from the University of Arkansas Fayetteville, and a master's degree in human resource development from Webster University. Randy served as executive director of the Arkansas Environmental Federation from 1993 to 2023, working with industries, utility, and public policymakers on issues related to the environmental protection and regulatory compliance. Randy is a founding partner of Government Solutions, LLC, a professional lobbying firm established in 1999. They provide full-service government relations for some of Arkansas's largest companies and professional associations and coolest professional associations like ArPA. Courtney Sheppard also served 6 years in the Arkansas House from 1995 to 2000. Including a stint on the City, County, and Local Affairs Committee as chair. He's also served in the Transportation, Revenue, and Tax, Joint Energy, Legislative Council, and Rules and Regulations Committees. Mr. Sheppard is recognized for his knowledge of electric deregulation, water conservation, timber, oil, gas, recycling, real estate, information technology, health, and tax issues. Woohoo! He received his bachelor's in science degree in history from Southern Methodist University and attended graduate school at the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville. Well, we have some on Fayetteville. He has extensive experience as a small businessman in real estate and nursing home administration, served in El Dorado City Council. He joined Government Solutions as a full partner in January 2001. He's also a former president and board member of the Arkansas Society of Professional Lobbyists. So today I asked our friends, Randy and Courtney, to enlighten us, give us some information, teach us about the importance of government relations, legislative advocacy, and inform us about some of the things that are happening in Arkansas right now. So I'm going to let you guys take it away.
Hey, thank you. Tisha, appreciate that. And Courtney, appreciate you being here to help me with this.
Stand behind you.
Courtney's the closest thing that we have to the late Chris Christopherson. You know, it kind of has that look of an old dead guy, right? So, anyway. Going to tell you a little bit about lobbying in general. I know for some of you it's familiar territory, and most people have a lot of misconceptions about what lobbyists do. And hopefully we can come away with a little better idea of what we do and what you can do and what you need to be prepared to do, because it's going to be an exciting session coming up, I think. All right. There we go. Got it. That's our contact information. You'll see that later on. So what do we do? First of all, you can very easily be a lobbyist. We are two of over 300 registered lobbyists in Arkansas, and if you want to do your math, there's only 135 legislators, so we outnumber them. We seldom get our way, but we do outnumber them. And why are there so many? Well, there's a lot of interest out there, but there's a lot of them that are registered because of the extremely low threshold that Arkansas law has that requires you to register as a lobbyist, and once you get registered, to report your activities financially on behalf of your clients. So you see up here, I think it's if you spend or receive, did I put that up there? Maybe not. $400 per quarter, then you have to register as a lobbyist. And you think, well, that is low, but what if I'm just driving up from, Hot Springs to watch the legislature for a couple of days and go to a committee hearing? Well, your travel and your hotel room and all that other good stuff adds up. And if you're going to do that more than a couple of times during a session, you probably need to register as a lobbyist.
And err on the side of
Exactly.
caution. If you're wondering, register or talk to Randy or me.
In most cases where you have a contract lobbyist who's out there representing you, like Courtney and I do on your behalf, your coming to the Capitol is not going to be questioned by anyone. You're there to meet with us, you're there to talk to legislators, but it's not, you've got somebody already fronting for you, so you really don't have to worry about it too much. So what do we do in general? We lobby individual legislators. We sometimes testify before committees. We don't like to do that because, frankly, we're the hired gun, and they know that, and they give us a hard time when we're there. Legislative receptions, we do one or two of those per session, and that's a good opportunity to meet people and schmooze and tell your story to open ears. We are your eyes and ears, and sometimes your voice at the Capitol, not just your, but all of our clients. We have a dozen clients. We provide intel, research, planning, and advice. We coordinate bill passage when you need a bill passed. It's a fairly complicated process. It's not out of the question for private citizen to do it, but there are some kind of boxes you got to check as you go. You don't want to offend anyone while you're doing that, so that's what we try to help you with. We also help with coordinating bill passage and finding sponsors. It's always good to have a great sponsor for a bill, and you guys have had great experience with sponsors in the past on some legislation that you had, and we'll talk about that. Build alliances. The best thing about lobbyists is there's so many of us. You're bound to find someone else out there, and sometimes a lot of someone else's, who have very similar interests. And every once in a while, you'll stumble across someone who doesn't like what you're doing, and they've got their own group, their own association. So you got to kind of sort through that stuff as the sessions go and as bills are filed. We track bills. That's sort of my nighttime job, 7 days a week during a session, is to read the bills that are filed and to literally, electronically, put them in stacks. Speech pathologist, Exxon, Toyota, psychologist. And I read every bill that's filed that day, and there are hundreds, in many instances, of bills, and I stack them. I don't always read them in depth, but if they seem dangerous or exciting in any sort of buzzy sort of way, I will flip yours to Tisha and let her know that this has been filed today. We'll get back to it, but have your people look at it. It may not be anything, but to me, it raises the hair on the back of my neck, you know. We track bills, we report on those, we coordinate client efforts, and of course, there's always the issue of campaign finance. Many people have the idea that we walk around with pillowcases full of cash, and we hand those out as we go. That was a few years ago. That's not the way it is now. But campaign finance is very restricted now. The only money that a candidate can accept would be individual money, no more corporate money, small business money, clinic money. Or if you have a PAC, if you have a business large enough to have a political action committee, that's the only two sources for money for any political candidate in Arkansas. All right? So we do a lot of that. We've got a couple, 3 clients, I guess, that participate, maybe 4. And our typical, just to give you an example, our typical election cycle, we're handing out around 50 to 60,000 a year to candidates, targeted candidates.
All 4 of our clients, 3 or 4.
Not buying anything other than a return phone call. That's about all you can get for it, you know. And then we attend hours and hours of boring meetings just for the opportunity to have 3 minutes with a senator often, or to leave a white paper with a House member. So, let me see. You'll have to excuse my drainage here. I got an issue going on with my throat and allergies. Let's see. Okay. Example of psychologist advocacy. Great example of good lobbying, not on our part, because all we were doing for you in 2021 was advising Glenn White and Tisha. And as you may know, the 2021 session, you guys passed your own compact law, SIPAC, Arkansas. It's Act 883. And you guys know what this does. I don't have to explain that to you, but all the states that are participating in SIPAC currently are at 42. So that gives you a lot of flexibility of where you can practice without having to pick up new licenses, new permits, whatever it is you have to do. The compact reduces regulatory barriers and increases access to mental health care by enabling psychologists to provide services in other SIPAC states. Provides a lot of flexibility in practice, professional mobility, obviously, and regulatory efficiency, and enhanced collaboration. And what's so great about that is these two folks, Tisha and Glenn, really ran the court with that legislation. Recall what was happening in 2021. We were in the midst of COVID. Legislators didn't even allow us to come up on many days. They had glass cages that they sat behind. I still wish they had those, actually. But you couldn't couldn't really access them at all. They discouraged us all from standing around in the hallways, that sort of thing. But Glenn took the bull by the horns and found a great sponsor in Dr. Lee Johnson.
Yeah.
Yep, and so that went through smooth. He would call me about 3 times a week asking advice, and I'd call Courtney and say, what do you think you need now? And we worked it all out, but it was a good piece of work there. Citizen advocacy, very minimal paid advocacy in that case. Excuse me. Did I miss something here? I guess not. So that was 2021. Also in 2021, the legislature passed Act 802, which created this legislative study group to look at mental health issues. And that was a 2-year stint for that group. And in 2023, our most recent regular session, we had, I think, 4 or 5 acts I'm going to talk about. Act 253, which directs a Medicaid program to provide supplemental reimbursement for physicians in the R-Home program at DHS. The Counseling Compact, they came in 2023 after you guys blazed a trail on that. And we sort of coordinated our efforts with another client along with counselors and one other group. I forgot who the third group was. All got compacts last session. More legislation that sort of has to do with counseling and psychology. Act 494 requiring Medicaid and insurance coverage of behavioral health services. Act 316 mandates that depression screening for birth mothers at the time of birth and requires insurance companies to pay for that. And Act, can't read this, that's 61, creates a specialty court for families involved in dependency neglect proceedings affected by substance abuse. Those were all counseling-related, psychology-related legislation. And then this last one, Act 522, reestablished that previous task force on mental health. So we had it in 2021. They sort of began to pull resources together. And then they created a task force, and that task force is still functioning today. You see this list of participants in that: legislators, healthcare providers, et cetera, educators, law enforcement. I think you participated in that time or two?
The next meeting is
October 14th. So what are they going to do on October 14th? Well, we can tell you that we have recently visited with Deen, chairman of that committee, along with Fran Cavanaugh. And I know I was trying to run Deanne down for you for 2 months before I finally went to a fundraiser. You know, here's a check. Let me talk to you a minute. Deanne and it told me, Representative Vaught told me that they had a list of legislation for this coming session, 2025. And she and Fran were going to sit down sometime, that was 2 weeks ago, sometime between now and I guess before your next meeting, and prioritize those bills, see which ones are doable, which ones maybe need some more work, and then I'm guessing that they're going to present those bills to you at your next meeting for review. And so we'll take it from there.
They've also, I think, pulled in Representative Hudson. She's been coming to those meetings.
Yeah.
Good.
So,
Good.
she's a good friend.
That's a good choice.
Right, yeah. She's very bright, yeah. All right.
Pulled in who? Representative Hudson. Ashley Hudson.
She's nice. State representative.
Is she really?
Yeah.
Okay.
She's out in West Little Rock.
So going forward in this 2025 session, this legislative task force that's focusing on mental health. This is a great opportunity for you as psychologists to become involved in the activities and become involved in creating new policy for the state. Arkansas is kind of at that prime moment, I think, where everyone is pointing to mental health as a real dire need. We have very little funding in the state that goes for that, very little focus in the past. But now, whether it's a plethora of guns and school violence and bullying, or whether it's just worn out old folks like myself needing some mental health, there's a real understanding, I think, at this moment in time with Arkansas legislators that we've got to move forward with promoting mental health. So I would encourage you to be active within this organization. This is a great organization for bringing people together on that subject matter. Associations, they fit the bill for the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment, which is the right to gather together to petition your government for change. I mean, that's all part of your fundamental rights, and our associations are great about consolidating that into one good effort. So you can benefit from your profession from a policy influence standpoint, professional recognition, resource allocation, and professional development. So I encourage you to stay engaged. And I guess, Tisha, you're going to still be the point person on that, or? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, Courtney, go ahead.
Well,
Come up here.
Well, that's something we've talked about, and many of you may already know about the Medicaid sustainability. It's not on the PowerPoint, but the Medicaid sustainability report came out in June or July. We're still not sure what it's going to do. They're looking at the passes. So that's one of the things they're going to do. I don't know what they're going to do with it. They're recommendations, so it's nothing's in stone. And again, all of that bears watching just with DHS. All of those are real important things. We continue to think that they're looking to shrink everything and get under a single payer, and these are things y'all talk about and know about in your business, so I'm not going to coach you on it. But if you can get that sustainability review, it's on the DHS webpage, and some of you can probably actually figure out what they're talking about. The other piece of that is we don't know, but we think they're going to have a host of bills in 25. This is the session in 25. So we don't know what those bills will look like, but y'all will certainly, your association and all the associations, you're going to need to weigh in on what that does to you, because in all likelihood, they'll continue to shrink services.
That's where it goes back to the allocation of resources.
Yeah, exactly. I shouldn't say shrink, that's the wrong word, but, it's the fight over the pie, and your piece of it, so.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
You just talked a few minutes ago about this mental health group that you're meeting, and they're coming up with these, concerns and things that they want to address to amplify mental health services in Arkansas. Yet, what I heard you just say is the legislature wants to shrink those resources.
I think the administration wants to shrink.
Yeah.
Right now, the timing on all this is that usually by September, all state agencies have to submit their budgets and their bills, not their budget, their bills for the next session, to the governor's office for review. And then by October, right now, the governor kind of check marks the ones that she approves, and the others go in the hopper. And you don't see those again. So that the command that she gave to, the suggestion that she gave to agency heads several months ago was zero growth in your budgets. That includes DHS. All right. So you stop and think about it. Her overall budget for the entire state was 1.7% growth, which is half what the current rate of inflation is. So even at best, if all you're doing is the same, you get less money. You got less money to play with. So
and there's another tax cut coming. I think we're pretty clear on that. That's been publicly stated. So
I think legislators themselves recognize that we've got to do something. How we do it in a zero growth environment is their problem right now.
And Tish is meeting with them already from So that's good. All
Courtney,
right.
what do you got there?
I'm annoying them.
Oh, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay, well. This is the 94th General Assembly makeup right now. These folks that we have here, you can see the difference. I mean, Democrats are pretty well non-existent. They got just enough folks there to make a little racket, but not influence anything. And so it is just the opposite of the way it was when I was in the House. Those numbers are almost exactly the opposite. The Democrats owned it then. The Democrats owned the responsibility then. The Republicans do now. That is not going to change in 1 month's time. With the election, there may be, I think there's maybe one seat in the House that may flip in the Delta, and one seat in the House Northwest Arkansas that may flip. From Republican to Dem, and over in the Delta, Dem to R. So.
Flip B to R.
Right. So you're kind of looking at the same cast of ne'er-do-wells. That's wrong. That's from a previous 68 days. We're obviously down 30. I gave this presentation a while back too. So what are we voting for? And I know you guys and gals are a little more savvy than most people on the street, but we're voting for all 100 House members. We're voting for 18 of 35 senators. Okay? That's a big bunch of folks, but very little competition, very little real change is going to happen. Very few people were term limited this session. We also have a race for the lone constitutional officer, state treasurer's office. You may remember a guy by the name of Mark Lowry was their state treasurer. Did a great job as former legislator, but he died in office. And the governor appointed Larry Walther to fill out his term. And Larry Walther's a Boy Scout knife for the state government. He fills every role, does it marvelously, but he is tired and he's getting remarried and he's starting a new life. So he's out, and so we have this race with John Thurston, who's our current Secretary of State, John Pagan, the former state senator, an attorney, and Michael Paco. Is it, you pronounce that Paco? I think it's Paco. We've seen him around the Capitol. I just never figured out how to pronounce his name. He's actually running as a libertarian, and he has a Ph.D. In economics. He's an economic forecaster, bright guy. He comes down there and testifies a lot. So that's your choice on treasurer. All of them are, in my opinion, very well qualified. John Thurston has had a few, bumps in the road recently on petition drives that he's certified and then uncertified, and so, made a mistake, let's certify. So he's got some baggage he's carrying right now. The other interesting race is the Supreme Court Justice race, and what you have here is Karen Baker, who's running for the Supreme Court Chief Justice, versus Rhonda Wood. They're both on the Supreme Court now, okay? And they're vying to see who's going to take, what's the name of this place? Kemp, yeah. Dan Kemp, who's been a marvelous, marvelous Chief Justice. And then you got all this going on from this last 2 weeks about, of the 7 Supreme Court justices, 6 of them are now under ethics violations investigations, with 5 of them accusing one and 2 of them accusing the other 5, and so they're all in this ethics commission. It's bizarre, and nobody really knows what started it. I mean, it's a FOIA request. Messy bunch. Okay, so that's the people that you're voting on. On ballot issues, we heard a lot of ballot issues early on. The only one we know for sure today that will be on there is one we can all agree with, and that is using the lottery money for VOTEC school students rather than just 4-year college, 2-year college. So that's, I think, one everyone agrees with. Ballot issues that are not going to be on the ballot that we heard about was right to government transparency. That's the FOIA, embedding the FOIA within the Constitution. That fell by the wayside. School standards for LEARNs. It wasn't undoing LEARNs. It was simply saying test them the same way you test public school students, and it had a few other things in there. That fell by the wayside. Came up short on signatures. Feminine hygiene and adult diapers for a sales tax initiative. I signed off on that, probably me and 12 other people. Anyway, it didn't make it. Lower age requirement for historic vehicles. Why do we have to have a constitutional, I don't know, but anyway, that fell by the wayside. Absentee voting restrictions initiative. I never got into that, but it had to do with actually having to declare much, much earlier that you're going to do absentee voting than the current law requires. It did not make it. And then paper ballots. Phew. That was an attempt by this, your buddy, Conrad, not Conrad Hooper, Conrad, I forgot what his name is.
But it's not.
Yeah, old military colonel. Anyway, he,
Sort of a political gadfly.
yeah, he's been around politics in Arkansas for decades. Anyway, they were doing that on a county by county basis. That wasn't statewide, and they chose 7 counties up in the Ozarks, and all 7 county clerks said, "Not going in the trash with that."
And what's interesting, they're now reviewing it in committee, which
Legislative
the
committee,
legislative committee, and you're thinking, they say, we want to see those signatures, again, back to the signatures about how you got that on there. So it's sort of funny. I mean, Randy and I worked for people just but 20 years ago when they were getting everything over
Yeah,
to them.
moving them to voting machines.
Because everybody were doing paper ballots and cheating, so.
And every audit that they've ever done of voting machines, 100% accurate. Nobody's ever found. Anyway, what else is not on the ballot? The abortion initiative. Got plenty of signatures on the technicality. They were thrown out. That technicality was argued by Thurston, who's running for treasurer now. So that is not going to be on the ballot for you. Yet to be determined. Got 2 issues here. One is the Citizens Initiative on the Polk County Casino license. This is totally an Indian Wars debate being fought right here in Arkansas. Millions of dollars from the Choctaw, millions of dollars from the Cherokees. Out of all of their financial reports, of all those millions of dollars, one $100 check was written by a non-Indian tribe person. So we are seeing the last of the great Indian Wars right here in Arkansas. And then yet to be determined, even as we speak, is whether or not medical marijuana made it, because again, John Thurston can't decide whether to count certain signatures or not, and that is before the Supreme Court.
No, they've ordered him to go back and count those.
Ordered him to go back and count them, but again, depending upon that decision, whether or not there'll be enough signatures. Courtney's kind of high on that medical pot, So what to expect from the 95th-year-old sitting? You want to cover this?
No, go
All
ahead.
right, go ahead.
You're on the roll.
What to expect? Just in general, you're going to see a shakeup in the House committees. I'm sorry, I forgot about the microphone. You're going to see a shakeup in the House committees. We've had the same Speaker of the House for 6 years now. 6 years. Matthew Sheppard from Courtney Sheppard's neck of the woods, El Dorado. He's going to remain in the House, but not running for Speaker of the House. We've got a great guy coming in from Cabot, Brian Evans, extremely sharp.
We worked with representatives.
That's right. I remember that. Very impressive meeting he was at. But I think Brian will have to respond to a lot of pent-up demand for committee assignments, committee chairmanships from these younger guys and gals who've come in since Matthew was first elected Speaker of the House 6 years ago. And they're saying, by golly, I'm as good as anyone up there. I deserve a chairmanship. So you're going to see some changes there.
Let
go
me
ahead.
just make a point, as you're talking about this group, it is completely term limited up there now. When I came in and right after Randy was in, term limits were passed. So now, all the guys, back to Randy's point, all those guys and gals that think they're, I'm going to be here for my little term limited 3 or 4 years, I want to be on a committee, or I want to be a
somebody,
chair or a
yeah.
vice chair or whatever. So that just sort of gets that churn going where everybody wants to,
Right.
to get in there, and they're going to be gone here in a few years because of term limits.
Good point. We've already talked about the zero budget mandate that the governor sent out several months ago. So you're not going to see a lot of innovative thinking. You're not going to see a lot of agency heads sticking their heads above the log, so to speak. Not a lot of risk taking anywhere. There's going to be a focus on higher education, which you think, probably sent. And the only thing we have to go by that is the governor making some comment about 2-3 weeks ago. We really like to focus on higher ed, but nobody's seen any proposals. And to your point on higher ed the other day, which I thought was very valuable.
Go ahead.
No, you expressed a lot better than I did.
Well, I don't know that I did, but yeah, they're talking about bringing in higher ed for training kids to be,
Free thinkers?
well, yeah, that's as good as any, but it's the whole woke thing down on higher ed. And we don't know that that's what it is, but that sort of strikes us as
Sounds like a good excuse.
what it might be.
I keep thinking back to when the governor was proposing, in that run-up to her first session, and she was a candidate for governor. And literally, it was 3 weeks before the election when the words parochial school left her mouth. Before that, it was, we're going to empower parents to make decisions for their kids. What the hell does that mean, Well, now we know. It's parochial schools and private schools and home schools and everything else that's coming out of public school money. So whenever someone just says, we need to focus on higher ed, you got to scratch your head and wonder, what's that one going to mean, to Courtney's point. I think there'll be some tinkering with learns. I've got heartburn with learns like it is, but still, they're not going to change it dramatically, but they may try to address maybe some of that testing standard issues, some of those things that cropped up in the pile of signatures, which actually they had enough to put it on the ballot, but they did not pass the Thurston test. Further efforts to degrade DEI and ESG efforts in the private sector. Everybody knows what this is, those three initials, that alphabet. Legislature is really at war with woke. They're really telling private businesses how to invest their money. They're really, in Arkansas, if you are on the list of people who boycott Israel, you can't be a state contractor. If you, there's a whole litany of things. If you do business with the Chinese, they're going to look at you. Yeah, I'm sorry.
It took me 6 months to get
I'm sorry. ESG? Yes. Environment, social, and governance. So this framework, this framework, we're looking at potential investments in a way that addresses those issues in the public district.
Well, they need one of the military communities, because the Air Force Base right now has like a lockdown on how they handle purchasing from any businesses, or certain businesses that are doing tech with the Chinese government already.
Right.
I mean, that's like something that's huge up there.
Right.
So that's a current.
Right, exactly.
At the federal
Right.
level, and they can't.
And probably at the federal level is where it needs to stay, but what we're finding is like Arkansas is, you got a whole little task force that looks at Chinese ownership of property in Arkansas now. And it was
over 50%, if it's 50.5%, then they can.
Call me cynical, but I think it was 2 months ago that Walmart announced, hey, we don't care what you guys think about DEI. We're going to continue our initiatives to diversify our employment base. We love our customers. Our customers are diverse. They're not all white males, We're going to continue that regardless of what Arkansas thinks or any other state thinks. I swear it wasn't 2 weeks later that all of a sudden this company owned by a Lee, L-I, in northwest Arkansas, gets on the hit list for this task force to investigate Chinese-owned properties. Now, guess what Lee does? They are a major supplier for Walmart. Now, everybody, if you look at the emails that were FOIA'd, you realize that the Attorney General and the governor's staff both knew exactly who Lee was and what he did before they initiated the investigation. Call me cynical. I think that's a shot over the bow. You know, if you're not going to play ball with us on DEI, we're going to catch you on the Chinese side of that coin. You know, it's a tangled mess there. I may be way off, but it was too timely.
Well, and to Randy's point, we were just not lectured, but on a regular conference call, we have the last Friday or the first Friday of each month, which we had this morning at 8, and we were told, look, if this question comes up, it's you know, we're an international company, and this is what we're doing. This is, you know, we kind of have to do it. It's kind of what it amounts.
But that's not going to go away. That's just a whipping child for a certain group of our legislators. Mixing religion in schools, we've seen this over the course of the last 10 years. Our least favorite senator of all time, Jason Rapert, you know, promoting that early on. He's no longer with the legislature, but he's got his own little bullhorn pulpit that he.
He's on the library.
He's on the library board. He's also has this National Association of Christian Legislators, and so if you go to his Facebook site, it's day after day of hammering on how we need to get back to the old-time religion here in Arkansas. Amen. And I think you're going to see a continuation of more pressure on local governments. And what does that mean? Well, when I was in the legislature, I served on city council, Courtney did too, but we always were told that it's the government that's closest to the people is the best able to solve people's problems. But what we're seeing now is the sort of pushback on municipal governments, because guess what? The larger the municipalities become, the more democratic they become. Okay, and they're more democratic in Little Rock, more democratic in Fayetteville. And a way to sort of curb their pushing democratic principles is to curb the authority of all local governments. And so we saw it most recently on crypto mining. You know, before anyone ever knew what crypto mining was, the legislature was already saying, you locals, you can't govern on that. That's our authority, not yours. And it blew up on them. We've seen it on pit bulls. You know, we've seen it on local governments regulating pit bulls in their community, on them regulating B&B, short-term rentals. You know, that one didn't pass, but it had a lot of legs. So every opportunity that they have to take a little authority away from the local governments, they're going to. And that's pretty much what I've got. We are here to answer any questions you may have. I know we ran long, and I'm sorry about that. So. Yes, sir.
We have a political action committee, and it's separate, obviously, financially from the association, because the association cannot directly contribute to a campaign.
From the PAC, and you yourself can,
right.
But your business cannot.
And we have very few people who call themselves professionals or whatever that want to get involved with these politicians. But they don't realize how important it is.
It is.
To know their local senator, their local House of Representatives.
Absolutely.
Person, so that we, as a PAC, even could probably even $50
Yeah.
show them that we give some support system.
Yep.
How might we get that information? Which of these legislators that we might want to be able to support?
Yeah, well, Courtney and I actually do a lot of that with our other handful of clients who do participate. Yeah, we actually come up with a list, and we don't just say, hey, give that money to them because Courtney knows them. We actually give our clients reasons. We usually have 5 or 6 reasons.
And,
that's
the committee members.
And as a way of justifying the contribution. And we'll even plug in a number, and depending upon your budget, you know, maybe $50 or maybe $500, but.
Right. And is it still with the state income tax, can you still get $100 deduction right off the top of the credit? We're donating up to
Right.
So
Yep.
we need to get that information.
Yeah.
Get $100, that's more credit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, will you repeat that just so that the people can hear?
I'm sorry.
The tax.
I'm sorry. Yeah. And that's an excellent point. And just give you an example. A long time ago, Courtney and I represented an optometry group. I forgot which. Anyway, they were. Yeah, we were always at odds with the local or the optometrist in the state because they had a lock. Anybody in here got an optometrist in their family? They had a lock on selling contact lenses. So our client could sell them in other states, by through the internet and mail, depending upon, the person's prescription. But here in Arkansas, you could not, and I don't think you still can do that. It was illegal to do it, so we're always at odds. So our client asked me one time, why in the world are those folks so strong with Governor Huckabee? Well, I really don't know. Boy, I spent a day and a half kind of going through financial records, and at one point, every seventh check the governor was receiving was a $100 check from a local optometrist or a $250 check. It was nickel and dime stuff, but the names were showing up so often, and it was a very structured association that pretty well pulled that money in and bundled it and handed it off. So.
Let me make one point, and I love where you're going with that. I think that's absolutely the thing to do. But there's nothing wrong with just writing a thank you note. I saw the vote you took on such and such. We've talked about you at our association meeting, keep up the good work, yada, 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 or even less, just a thank you. And that means a lot to them. And money helps.
Money helps. Go to their events, go to their fundraisers. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
What we discovered was that they just like the recognition.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's why they ran for office. That's why Randy ran anyway.
So we've got just a few minutes and I want to give us some break time in between, and I do not want us to miss our next presentation. As the government relations chair, I just want to reiterate just how imperative it is that we have Randy and Courtney on our side. You just heard they know they can put their head to the rail tracks and they can hear. They know what's going on the Hill. I'm limited. I work for a state entity, so my ability to actually go and interact a lot with legislators is limited because of my job. And so their ability to kind of help keep us informed of what's going on. They do a fabulous job of tracking bills and keeping us in the know about things that are going on. And as you guys can see, it's so much more than just the legislative session. Like all year long, we've got stuff with Medicaid. The mental health work group has been meeting, and they will have legislation. And we have legislation to ask them about too. And so they're really willing to listen. And that the name, the little R or D besides their name doesn't necessarily matter depending on the issue. Like I've had really great working relationships with many legislators that have R's by their name. So it's really important that we build those relationships. And like they said, that they know who we are. For the first time ever, I was in a meeting with DHS yesterday. And, they don't know what neuropsychologists do. They don't know what an assessment is. And so I was able to talk to them and give them information about this is what you're paying for. And this is how your policies are restricting what kids are getting. But if we aren't able to get in front of those people, they don't know. They hear words, but they don't know what those words mean. So it's really, really important that we, continue this work. And, many hands make light work. So, the more people we have involved, the more that we can do. And, like they said, we have been really restricted for a lot of years because it's been only volunteer-based. And Randy and Courtney generously nearly just donated their time to help us. Now that we have them as our retained lobbyists, I call them, I can text them, I can email them. They're always incredibly helpful. I'll just say, as one example of that, I've had several members and psychologists reach out and be like, I want to be on the psychology board. And I put in my application, but I haven't heard anything back. And I was like, yeah, starting with Governor Hutchinson's administration, there was sort of a lockdown, and we don't really know what's happening with that anymore. So I reached out to Randy, and I was like, do you know, who's in charge of doing this at the governor's office, and kind of what the process is? And he did some reconnaissance for me, made some phone calls, tracked down Melody, I think is her name, and I got her in touch with me. And I talked to her, and she said, oh my gosh, please help us. We have all these applications, and we don't know who to appoint. Please, ArPA, give us some recommendations. But we had been trying for months, and nobody knew, not even the board. I would ask the board, who does this? We don't know. So, just, a text or an email to Randy, and, a few weeks later, we have an answer, and now we're developing a process. So, and that's a big deal to psychology, right? It's a big deal who is on our board, and that our board is functioning. And, kudos to our board members who have continued to keep working on the board, even after their terms have expired, or done a lot of work in the last few years, during these transitions.
So are they going to take ArPA's recommendation like they did in the past?
I mean, I don't know if they are going to, they're going to consider our recommendation. I have no idea if that means who we ask is going to get appointed, but we have a point person. She knows who we are. She is asking for our recommendations. We are going to send recommendations by the end of the year. And we're working on our process for doing that right now.
I think that the concern on Tisha's part was that the state law is very structured on when those recommendations could be made. And we had missed all deadlines, and yet we had a lot of vacancies. So basically, go send us what you got. We'd be happy to take it, tickled to take it. So.
Yeah.
Like in the past, the board would just submit those recommendations when you knew that they were open.
Yeah, and we had done that. We did that during Governor Hutchinson's administration, but nothing happened with those recommendations for a long time.
Well, as you can imagine, though, there's a lot of people lining up to get on those.
I think, didn't she say that she had, I want to say it's 27 applications?
Yeah, I mean, they have applications, but they don't know how to sort through the applications. But the example is just that, whenever we have people on our side who know how government works, who knows how to find who's the person to talk to, we can get things done. Me personally, or you personally, or, most of us, we don't have the inside to get the answers. And it may not be that there's something obstructive happening. It's that we don't know who to talk to. So it's just really important to do that.
Let me make two quick suggestions of ways you can help. Ways you can help Tisha and myself and Courtney. I'm flipping her bills usually every day during the session. I know she probably needs more than her eyes to look at those. And if someone on the board, or even not on the board, if you've got a long history of the profession, that can look at a bill and say, no problem here, maybe, just to alert us so we know to pay more attention to it. Otherwise, it's going to get lost in the stack. That's one way. Second way, the second thing you can help us with is we have had times, it happens every session, where we will have a client issue pop up and almost immediately have to have a response. And we had that with surveyors one time. A bill had been filed, we were all aware of it, and all of a sudden the sponsor was going to run the bill. And I called my guy and said, well, I'm on the road, let me take this exit right here. And he's at the Capitol, right there. He's driving past the Capitol, wasn't planning on coming by. got him with the sponsor of the bill, we got our changes made, and we're good to go. So it's almost like you need a quick reaction force of maybe 3 or 4 people who are right here local, who can do that sort of thing and can speak. If we hand you a piece of white paper, like I say, they'll listen to us, but they will really listen to you if you show up. Have that and somebody to review bills. Those 2 things I see as a need for all of my clients.
So I want to make an announcement. If you guys are here, surely you have gotten emails about our modernization fund that goes towards our directorate and our website and all the new cool things we're doing. Randy and Courtney are part of our directorate as our lobbyists, so it helps to fund our surprise. No, helps to fund and keep that going. Really to kind of help supplement what we've been doing for this year and to help us to get to where we can be more sustainable. We currently have $3,470 that have been donated. 11 people have donated so far. We've had a generous donation from Dr. Griffin, which we're very grateful for. And I am 100% sure that we got my match, so we'll add another 500 to that. Please think about all of these things we've talked about and how, if the bare minimum thing that we can do is if you can't spend any time and you don't really want to think about this and you're like, please don't talk to me about this, like if I come and bother you and you give me some money, I'll be like, okay, never mind. Like, I'll leave you alone. So
I think one thing to think about with this is, I don't know if you guys ever search online, what's the best state to live in when you're a psychologist? Because you're frustrated with work or government or something like that. But wouldn't it be cool if Arkansas was number one? We have bills and laws in place, we have an organization that really supports psychologists, we have a lot of growth, and that's part of what all of this is just making it easier to do our jobs well.
So I'm here to talk about kind of what's it like, and she's going to be the info.
Awesome. All right. So our takeaways today, we have 3 of them. How do you amplify your reach with both AI and media? So this is applicable if you are a therapist, if you are a professor, if you're a researcher. If you say, I don't want to do any of this, I don't want to be on media, but I want to help support ArPA, all of this is still applicable. We're also going to discuss what does it mean to build or to think through the first few steps of building a thought leader identity. And then also, of course, the ethical considerations when it comes to integrating AI into your work. Alrighty, so we have a question. We want this to be very interactive. We want you to have some takeaways from this as well. So how many of you have ever felt like you're just very limited in your work, you're limited in what you can share? Maybe it's just within the 4 walls of your office, but you want to do more outside of that.
So we have a few people that say they feel limited in sharing their expertise. And then what does it mean to really break through those barriers? Because often when it comes to developing your own media brand, whether it's you as a brand or your clinic as a brand, we have these barriers, especially these mental ones. How do we break through those? So we're going to talk about those.
One of the things that, because I had someone that actually was, she's not a psychologist, but she was urging me to write and that kind of thing. And my hesitation, this was back 12 years ago, my hesitation was, well, who am I to call myself an expert? Mm-hmm. I'm just a little therapist in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And she said, how long on social media do you think the definition of it, how long should you be doing what you're doing to be called an expert? I said, 20 years. She said, 5 years. If you've done that for 5 years, then on social media, you're considered an expert. I was just, my jaw dropped. I said, all right, I've done it 4 times longer than that. So there you go.
And that kind of goes back to that. You've probably heard you spend 10,000 hours doing something, you're officially an expert. So that's kind of, it coincides with what you brought up, but that's a really, good point. Okay. Awesome. So when we talk about the power of media and AI in a modern mental health practice, there are 2 things that we want to consider. One, it's at AI. It is everywhere. It's not going anywhere. It's actually been around for decades, but now it's available to us.
to use. So what are some of the best ways to do that? And I'm actually going to pull in a lot of what we've been doing with ArPA in this as well. So scaling impact, right? We use automation. You guys have gotten lots of emails from us over the last few months. Just to kind of sum it up, we've sent out over 10,000 emails to psychologists around the state of Arkansas in just the last few months. So definitely putting ArPA out there. That is something you can do in your practice. So let's say you are working on a research about being trauma-informed, maybe for, let's just say, trauma-informed for in early childhood, for example. You can use the power of AI to scale that, to put your information in front of more people. So whether it's repurposing content and putting it on social media, whether it's writing emails and putting it out there to more people, AI is a tool. Think of it as a billion little assistants to help you with the research and to get in front of more people. And then we also want to look at it from, the media platform standpoint. So Dr. Margaret has an amazing podcast. So that is one way. If you are a speaker, podcasts are great. If you like video, you definitely want to get in front of the camera. I'm not a camera person, but but I'm trying to get there. And if you're a writer, then blog post is another really great way to put your expertise out there. So you can start, I say it's a compounding effect, so just start somewhere and just continue. Even if it's just once a month you put something out there and then leverage maybe AI to help you repurpose that content and give it legs.
Can you operationalize that when you say use AI to?
Absolutely.
Can you talk about what that's like?
So how many people use ChatGPT? How many people are scared of ChatGPT? Like, I don't want to touch it. Okay. So for example, if you want to create a 30-day campaign, let's say you are speaking on or doing some work with anxiety, right? And you want to create a 30-day campaign, you can use ChatGPT to help you get the foundation. So to create like a basic 30-day outline, and then you want to humanize it. You want to add your expertise to whatever ChatGPT gives you. But that's a way, instead of, if you were to do it by hand, it may take you, let's say, 2 weeks to come up with the 30-day plan. ChatGPT can give it to you in 2 minutes, right?
And when you say that, you mean this is what you need to do on day one. This is what you need to do on day two.
Day 1, day 2, day 3. And then you say, now that you have your plan, give me the post day 1 through day 7 for LinkedIn, day 1 through day 7 for Facebook. And you can go through all of the platforms, right? So the key is prompting. That's what you really want to get good at, and that's just having a conversation with it like you would someone else, right? That it's as simple as that. It's just having conversation, typing it out, being very clear about what you want it to do, and just continue to refine it.
I've never used AI except for titles of things, and AI will say this is a great title, this is not so great. But this, I will tell you that, being the person who comes up with all the content for my blog posts, my podcasts, and I did a TEDx. But anyway, I mean, it all comes from me. It's very time consuming. And I'm going to use this because this is going to be great, because that is a lot of generation, and you post differently on LinkedIn than you do on Instagram, than you do on Facebook, right, and all that kind of thing. And so AI, I'm assuming, would already then create that for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Create it for you, and then all you have to do is just edit it and make sure you add your tone of voice, your experience, your wisdom to what it gives you.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is important to figure out, and only 2 of you raised your hands about, I'd like to do this more, but one of the things, I started blogging because there were some things in my personal life that I needed to stay at home, and my son had just left for college, and I said, well, what can I do? And I like to write emails, and again, this person who urged me to do this said, I think this is what you should do. But I didn't want my name on the website. I'm a psychologist. I'm like, no. So I called it Nest Ache because I was writing about empty nest. I didn't say, it was 2 years before I started drmargaretrutherford.com, because I had to get used to the idea of having more of a public presence. And it was difficult for me. It was not, I mean, I seem probably pretty extroverted, but I'm actually somewhat introverted. So it was hard for me to say, well, you know, I get criticized, or what if I, you know, I have a perspective as a 60-something-year-old white Southern woman. And how can I ever get out there and represent, you know, or try to speak to more diversity? But what I found was that as the more I wrote, the more I dipped my toe and then my foot and then my calf into the water, that it got easier, and then some ideas started coming. So I think that AI would have made that process for me much easier to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and to your point, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And also, the more you do it, the more your audience will tell you what they want to hear from you.
Yes, they will.
Yeah.
They'll tell you what they don't want to hear from
Exactly,
you as well.
exactly. And so then, you know exactly who you're speaking to, and you know by listening to your audience that all that you put out there is going to be exactly what they need. And that's what continues to grow your brand and put you in front of more people.
Right. You want to talk about branding?
Yeah, I think that's,
All right, she just used a word
we're going to skip ahead a
that
little
12 years ago I hated, and that word was brand.
bit. Mm-hmm.
Because I had people who were helping me who said, okay, you've got to be a brand. I'm not a brand, I'm a person, I'm a psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
I really had a very bad reaction to that word until I've been in the business long enough to realize what a brand means is that it gives people something to hook into you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, she's the, I mean, my mantra for the podcast is, what can you do about it? Oh, she's the therapist that talks about what you can do about things. Sort of brandish. But I think we as psychologists, I know I did, have we do something very intimate. We do something, we are holders of an emotional space that is important for people, whether you do assessment or whatever it is, teaching. And to come out in public like that and then be a brand is kind of tough. It was for me. But I do think that if you shift your thinking about it some, we call ourselves CBT therapists. We call ourselves, a certain kind of faculty member, an assistant professor, whatever. We do have a brand that is associated with us already. It's just not something that you want to, necessarily are very comfortable with spreading. But it is, I'm saying this to you because if any of you want to do this, I did it the hard way. I did not take the advice that I was given. And I didn't push myself as a brand until I still don't push, hopefully, but until I was in it for so long that then I kind of understood what branding was about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. And you think about it like brand is the brand of you. Who are you? What do you want to represent? What's the message that you want to put out in this world? And more than importantly, what's the legacy that you want to leave? That is your brand. It's the power of you. And so as you think about it, even go home tonight and think about what if I were to create a brand right now, what do I want it to say? How do I want it to make people feel? And your brand, you may decide, I don't want to do a brand around me at all. So it may just be your clinic, your practice, your book, a webinar. There are so many different ways that you can brand the work that you do to help hundreds of thousands of people out there. Because once you put it out there, it's out there. It's just a matter of making sure you get it in front of more people. Yeah. Yeah, I know.
What legacy do you want to leave at your brand?
Mm-hmm.
That also sounds like mission statement.
It is, yeah, exactly. That's a really good question. So I know when I work with mental health professionals, I actually tie it all together because the work that you do, whether, like I say, you're on therapy side or research side, is so intimate and it's so important that mission is just ingrained in all of that, right? And so is vision. What is that vision? What do you see when you got into this line of work? Where did you envision yourself that you would be 10, 20 years down the road? So I think it all really ties together because it comes from your soul.
Mm-hmm.
It comes from your soul.
Online folks are saying, could you all repeat the question so they can hear it or the gist of what they're saying to
Okay.
the audience? Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the first question was, there's a question around ethics, like, how do we make sure that what we're doing is ethical? And then there's also misinformation, so putting your brand out there helps to combat the misinformation. And also, how do you protect yourself against online trolls and people that want to do you harm or people that want to stalk? And I actually have been there. Mm-hmm. I've been there. This was over 15 years ago when I started the brand of me. And I had someone that pulled some of my information from the state's website, right? And I really didn't know as much as I know now about how to protect myself. So what I would say is make sure that if there's information online that you don't want to be there, there are sites that can help you clean it up. Make sure that the state records, because it is public, doesn't have your personal address, personal phone number on it. Like, those are things that you could do to help protect yourself, especially as women. We just have to be very vigilant, or I should say cautious about what we put out there. But what I will say is, even though I had that experience, that will not stop me from doing what I know that I'm purposed to do, because it's so much bigger than that one incident. And that one incident is also rare. But it can happen. So, to your point.
I've had people disagree with me. I write about something I term perfectly hidden depression, and I've written books about it. Already a book, I'm writing a second one. But anyway, and there were a lot of people who, when they began, a fair amount of people who, when I began talking about it, especially on Facebook, said, you are pathologizing resilience. When I'm talking about, being responsible and having marching through something that's really difficult without feeling your pain about it, and which, is about camouflage and perfectly hidden depression. But people were saying, you're taking something that is a positive trait and pathologizing it. You're taking resilience and courage and making it something that's about hiding and camouflaging. And I said, I'm not pathologizing resilience. It's very important, but there is a subset, there's a subset of people who may look resilient and may look very stoic but they are also people who have trauma in their backgrounds that they are not, and they don't even know how to talk about it. Mm-hmm. So, but I want to normalize this a little bit. I've done some theater in the Northwest Arkansas area, and I played Desiree in a little night music, and at the end of the musical, she kisses her, the guy that they've been flirting with, a years-long relationship. Well, I had a patient who came to see it, and she sat down, and she said, I saw your play, and I said, oh, okay, what did you think? And she said, I can't see you anymore. And I said, why can't you see me? What's going on? She goes, you kissed another man on stage. Mm-hmm. So, unless you stay in a bubble, and especially in a rural area like Fayetteville, you're going to have exposure to people in your community, and they're going to make decisions about you, right? Mm-hmm. I decided when I started writing, and this was not an easy decision, that I was going to be very honest about who I was. I have panic disorder. In fact, it's performance anxiety. That's one of the reasons why I'm sitting down. I've been divorced twice, and I have a history of anorexia. And in order to be myself, I was going to not talk about those things, a lot. But I was going to say, I know what this feels like to have a panic attack. I know what it feels like to feel like a complete failure in relationships. And so what I have found is that people go, well, thank goodness. You're talking about yourself like you're a normal or relatively normal person with relatively normal struggles. And rather than my fear was saying to me, people are going to say, well, what are you doing telling me what to do? You're obviously a screw up. That's what my own shame voice was telling me. And I said, okay, well, let's see if that comes. And that is not what has come. So, there you go.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Yeah. Awesome. So we're just curious. We want to poll you all and see how many platforms have you used when it comes to putting your message out there. I know Facebook is pretty popular. A lot of people use it for personal reasons, but think about your brand. Are there some that you find that you just love or love to hate? Just kind of curious, what you all think. Or maybe you're not on any at all.
I was about to say, who of you does post on social media?
So I'm building a website currently, and I'm very fortunate to be someone who loves to do that.
Oh, that's nice, because it's expensive.
It has taken me years to get to that point because the barrier of entry of, well, how do you even start? And then have to go learn SEO and then all of that stuff. And so when you're talking about AI, I've used that to generate like seed questions and ideas for content. So it's just like a title, but then I have to do all the work.
Right.
So websites mostly.
Okay. Yeah, that's
Excuse me,
good.
I'm sorry, if people virtually are not able to.
To hear.
the
Okay.
discussion,
Okay,
So
sure.
if you all don't mind just briefly kind of
Yeah.
what somebody said.
Yeah. So Mara was saying that she is building a website. It's taken quite some time to do that, but she has used AI, ChatGPT to help create the seed questions. It helped help her to formulate the answers. Because building a website is a big endeavor. That's a big project to start with. I know some people start there and others start with social media.
Anybody else? What platform have you used? Yeah.
I have some professional platforms. I don't use them a lot. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X.
Okay. Yeah, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, now X. I still call it Twitter. Those are some of the most popular ones. Yeah, for sure. I will tell you, as psychologists, there are 2 other ones that you may want to look into, and that's going to be LinkedIn. LinkedIn's amazing for your profession. And then TikTok. TikTok, you may have heard, it's really great, like TikTok therapy. It's a lot of mental health professionals that are on TikTok and growing brands on just that singular platform as well. And it's a great place to connect with other experts in your niche.
Okay, who's going, ugh?
Oh yeah, who's freaking out about all this?
Anybody having a negative reaction to this at all?
I think TikTok is
Oh, you are?
And part of it is because I think it's already been discussed about how much misinformation is out there.
Yeah.
But TikTok is like a cesspool of misinformation about therapy and mental health, but it's also where a lot of people are going for that information.
Absolutely.
And so I think really the challenge there becomes, well, how do you present yourself as an expert, or how do you say like, no, that is wrong, and here's why.
And so the question is, or the conversation is about TikTok. How much misinformation is out there on TikTok, and how do you combat that? And just like what you said, saying, no, this is what it is, right? You have to put a stop to all the misinformation and talk about like what is true, what is accurate, what does the research say? And so that's personally me, why I started Mentally Balanced Media, is because I noticed that during COVID, there was a uptick in misinformation. And you had a lot of people that were out there saying, I'm a life coach and let me tell you how to do da-da-da-da. Or I'm a therapist, and you look and they have no credentials. And it bothered me to my core because people were already struggling because of what all came with COVID. And then you have this misinformation and people are just confused about which way to go. So I wanted to create a way to assist partner with mental health professionals to put their voice and their message out there. And so that's how Mentally Balanced Media started. So that was my mission. That's my vision. And really that's my brand, because I don't have much of a personal brand myself. I led with this work. And so if you don't want to lead with a personal brand, you can, lead with your work until you're ready to start your own.
Yeah, I moved from Nest Egg, which was about empty nest, and then I went into drmargaretweatherford.com, and that was because I wanted to start writing about what I had done as a therapist. And, some of my clients, not many have really talked to me about it too much, or they'll say, I listened to your podcast on blah, blah, blah. I've had to reassure a couple of people that I don't talk about the people I'm seeing I don't use them as a case study or something. I'm not going to do that. In the book, everyone was amalgam of, 4 or 5 or 6 other, they were all mixed up. And so sometimes the confidentiality is something I need to discuss. What is a little odd is if I write about something personal, which I have from time to time, some of my clients will want to talk about that with me. And so I've had to say there's a boundary there. There's a boundary between what I write about. I can't erase it from their minds, but I can say, this relationship is about you, and we're going to keep it about you. And so sometimes they're curious, but I have made sure that it's a pretty strong boundary around that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. So I know we're going to talk more about your personal experience and how did you transition? So what are those first steps if someone comes to you and they say, Dr. Margaret, I want to do this, but I don't know what the first step is. What advice would you give them?
Yeah. Well, I was very comfortable with writing. I like to write, and so I started blogging. I happened to write a blog post that went viral where I picked the term perfectly hidden depression out of the air. I think that, if you'd asked me 12 years ago or 10 years ago, do you want to write a book? I would have gone, no, I don't want to write a book. I kind of am working way into my blogging thing, but what happened was in my own evolution that as that blog post went viral and I got curious, and then I had blogging friends who were recommending that I try to write a book. And so I guess what I would say to you is that it's just like anything else. You don't really know if you're going to take a hike and you're not real sure where you're going. You take the hike and you see, well, how do I feel now? Mm-hmm. Am I tired? Am I curious about what that trail might be like? That it is a very organic, to use an overused term, process that I went from blogging, and I still blogging to try my hand at writing a book, to hearing from publishing companies that, well, nobody knows who you are, so we're not going to publish your book, to then podcasting. I had been a jingle singer in my 20s, so I was very comfortable around a microphone, and I thought, I can do this. And actually the podcast is something that has gone great guns. Now, I had to have a team help me. Mm-hmm. So it has been on the expensive side because I have had, I've had an assistant and then she became more of an assistant and then I had an audio engineer and, and you pay the people who market your book and all that kind of stuff. So, and mine was never about making money. That's something, as you build a website, are you trying to get clients? Mm-hmm. Mine was never about getting clients. I had all the clients I needed. So, but that's something that a lot of people do. They use their websites to attract clients and even book clients. So, mm-hmm. And then what happened, well, it doesn't matter. I won't go into that. But I guess when you start, I can't stand Twitter. I hate Twitter. I've told a lot of people that it was like I was in the 7th grade again. And, you know, you go to cotillion in the 7th grade and you walk and then, you know, all these people are in little tight groups and you're kind of going, well, can I say something? You know, that's what I felt like on Twitter. I like Instagram. I've done a fair amount on Instagram, but I've kind of backed off of that kind of thing. So, again, it's just sort of an organic journey.
Do you want to share more about just building your presence? Because you have your podcast, millions of downloads, and then your TEDx
But there are people
talk.
with 50 million downloads, and I have 5 million downloads.
And that's a great deal.
Yeah.
So you have 5 million downloads, and then you have your TEDx talk as well.
Yeah.
So how many people have thought about or watched a TEDx talk and felt that could be me, or maybe I want to do that? Like seriously. Because everyone in this room has something they can say on a TEDx talk, right?
An idea worth sharing is what it's about.
Yeah.
Well, again, if you had talked to me 12 years ago and said, do you want to do a TEDx? One, I probably would have gone, what is a TEDx? And I would have said, no. I have performance anxiety. The last thing I want to do is get up and stand on a damn red dot and try to remember what I've memorized, you know? So I didn't want to do that. It has come that kind of gradual, okay, well, if life is inviting me to do this, then I'm going to try. I say something to my clients all the time that I apply to myself. If I believe something should exist and it does not, then I want to try to create it. And so that's what the book was about. The TEDx actually came as a quick story. These people on LinkedIn reached out to me, and one of them had one of her best friends kill herself. And at the service, at the funeral, suddenly, unexpectedly, at the funeral, the husband of that person came up and had my book in his hand and said, I found this on, her name was Patricia, on Patricia's bedside table. And so these women wanted to know about perfectly hidden depression, and I talked more about it. And then one of them was a co-organizer of a TEDx in Boca Raton, and she said, I want you to submit. I submitted the first year, 22, didn't get in. I submitted again in 23, got in. And it has been, I mean, there are plenty of TEDx's that but mine's done pretty well. And so, because I think it's the message, I think we as mental health professionals need to understand that somebody walks in our office and smiling and happy, and we go, oh, they're not depressed. No, that's not true. So anyway, that's kind of been my journey as far as what I'm doing now. And I was having a panic attack during my TEDx. And I actually was. The lower half of my body was like going crazy. So I still have the same problems I've always had.
Yeah, well, going back to legacy as well, you know, that's part of your legacy, right? That TED Talk, TEDx Talk, that podcast is going to be around forever unless you decide to take it down.
Yeah.
But people have downloaded it, so it's going to be around forever.
Yeah.
That's selling it, not selling it.
That's scary.
It's got,
In fact, I'm turning 70 in 2 weeks, and so one of my friends said about the book and the TEDx, she goes, this is your legacy. And I thought, what, does that mean I'm ready to die? I mean, you know, I've got a few more years in me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is. And it's a little scary to think about that. But, you know, I would have been really bored the last decade, I think, if I hadn't tried. So
Yeah, it is scary, too, because we're going to talk about next some of the barriers. I know we covered some of them. But it is scary when you want to put yourself out there. I know I have lots of fears. This is actually my first time speaking in front of anyone in probably like a decade. So I was a little nervous myself. So, you know, it happens. But when you are in your zone of genius, you just become so comfortable and it just flows out of you. Like I just kept saying all week, you know, life happens. So, right, when you want to build a brand, life's going to happen. I've had family responsibilities shift, and it threw off the last few weeks of my life. But I said, I want to make sure that I show up and speak from my overflow, right? And so when you all show up, you're going to speak from your overflow because it's there. It's just a part of you. It's going to come out. Greatness is going to come out. And so I tell people all the time, no matter what those fears are, we worry about like loss of privacy, we worry about being criticized because people can be cruel for no reason. But greatness is always going to show up as long as you believe in it. And it really is just a mindset when it comes to building your brand, because you're constantly building one block at a time.
Yeah. And then there are also things, there are people who, there's a woman on Instagram, Dr. Julie is the sort of thing. And I just saw her listed as one of the 10 most influential people in mental health. And she has a good book. No one told me about this or something. Why didn't anybody tell me about this? She has a film crew, I guess, and she videos herself constantly. I don't want to do that. Let me take a selfie. That's not me.
Okay.
And so I haven't been. That has not been the place that I want to spread my message, and so. Because I like to write more than I do that. So anyway, you'll find your niche. You'll find your niche.
Or it'll find you.
It'll find you.
It'll find you. Yep. Awesome. So now, go ahead.
I was just curious. I'm very early in my career, but it seems like there's lots of conversations surrounding AI, and that's kind of the direction a lot of people are headed. But like, what advice would you have for very early career psychologists who? We know there are people around us who have more expertise, and we're kind of just getting our feet wet and figuring out kind of our path and our journey. Do you have any advice for how to utilize AI
when you're just starting out? That's an excellent question. So the question is, what are some of the best ways to use AI if you are an early career professional just starting out, especially when it seems like other people around you are using it, but you're not quite sure how you want to? I say research is one of the best ways to use it. There's so much information out there, but you can type in what you're looking for. So let's say you have a patient that has come into your office and you want to know about maybe a different therapeutic approach. AI is going to be a really great way to learn about that in just a few minutes. If you want to get some journal articles, you can ask it and it'll give you links to journal articles. Let's say you want just help thinking through maybe a treatment plan. You can put some information in there. Of course, it's anonymized for privacy. You'll put information in there and it'll give you some ideas on a, just treatment plan, or maybe just a skills worksheet to hand out. So those are some really great ways to use AI. But I will say, like, researching other approaches is a really popular way as well.
That's a great idea. Because I put in something and then Google gives me like 6 or 7 things and I have to go to 6 or 7 things. That's a great idea. I also would add, if you wanted to write about your experience, let's say, if you wanted to blog about it or talk about it on something, there are a lot of people out there that are early in their career.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would go, I can't believe I'm hearing from somebody who feels just like imposter syndrome, blah, 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 blah. It's like, you don't have to pretend that you're somebody with 15 years of experience. I said at the beginning a few minutes ago that I knew that my perspective is limited by the life I have led. And so I'm not going to speak to everything. I can't. I can't. I just I try to do research and then speak to what feels right to me and what I have learned from my clients in therapy. I've learned so much from them. So, if you got to say, I'm not going to pretend to be something I'm not, but I'm also going to, this is the audience I want to speak to right now, the people who are right where I am. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. Another thing that popped in my head about, using AI and ChatGPT too, let's say you have 20 journal articles, and there's no way you'll get through those in just, a week. You can actually upload those to ChatGPT, and it will summarize those journal articles for you. So that makes it much easier to consume that information. And then if you say, this is the article that I want to focus on, then you can actually read the full article. So it's a great way to help to summarize that information as well. Yeah, it is magic. It is magic. So I know we talked about some of our concerns that we've dealt with when it comes to building an online presence, but curious if anyone else wants to share some of their concerns.
Well, I have one because of the work that I do with the nonprofit I work for. I have high safety concerns. I work with people who are survivors of sex trafficking. We're always constantly dealing with dangerous situations. So anytime my name ends up getting attached to stuff, not just in this country, but in other countries, that I don't put my name hardly anywhere, and I block everything because I have people contact me from God only knows where they are, and I don't need that. And so I don't think I can build much online. I have to be very careful about what kind of online brand I build and where I build it, because I need networking, and I already have a network, but I need to expand it. But I don't just do networking with people that network here. I go on the ground and do training where I'm in a red light district in a really dangerous spot, and I have to be. That's what I mean. I don't need anybody to recognize my face.
Yeah. Right.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense. So the comment was about, if you work in a field that requires a high level of discretion or privacy, such as working with sex trafficking survivors, and you're also doing training, like what does it look like to build a brand when you need discretion and safety is a concern? Yeah. So I will say that I've done work on in sex trafficking, and it did require a great deal of anonymity. And you can explore using an alias. You do not have to put your face online at all. And if it requires a face, you use AI and you can create a face. You can create a body. You can create a video person.
Hey, can I create?
I just wrote a section on sex, and Twitter.
Exactly. You probably have seen some of the AI videos, the avatars. I mean, you really can if you need to get the information out there, but you need to be safe. Yeah.
Well, and I know a woman, her name is Jennifer Marshall. She wrote about her bipolar disorder for years before she decided, I'm going to come out and say who I am. And that when she did that, she started this nonprofit called This Is My Brave, that features people standing up and talking about their mental struggles, their mental health struggles. And it's now an international organization. So, when you decide, obviously in your position, something like Selena just said is going to be important. But there are people who write undercover, so to speak, for a while, or even blog, or even a podcast. And that might be kind of hard. But that sort of revelation, or when you are ready to say, this is my struggle, then you can do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really great question. Other concerns? Time. Yeah.
Because we all have high-demand jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes building an online presence doesn't have anything to do with our day job. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You work for UAMS. I'm not building a UAMS online presence. UAMS has already done that. It's more like personal, different. So it's outside of work hours, outside of all of that time. And it's like, well, it's so slow going. How do you keep momentum going into something like that?
Yeah, that's a really great point. So how do you keep momentum when time is limited? I say start small. Maybe you do one blog post a month, one a quarter. If you want to do video or audio, stick with once a quarter, and then see how that feels. Then once you get that down, then you can increase it to once a month. So start small to where you want to feel that stretch, right? Because it's something new, but you also want it to feel attainable so that you can continue the momentum. If you're going to use AI, you can take the 1 hour video, one blog post, and you can create 100 different posts from that. And so now you have all of your content just from, a couple hours of your time per month.
Just related to that, that's just so you all know, that's what Mentally Balanced Media has done for us with ArPA, that when you all say like 1 hour content, you all have generated hundreds of posts, and then that can go out at least once a day. That's why you see that on LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook. That's based on content, even this content from today, right? Or even from the newsletter, right? It's even written content. They've taken information from written content with our newsletter and been able to generate social media posts from that. That keeps that momentum going just based on just this bit of work that we did with our newsletter.
Yeah, so here's an activity. Go home, take about an hour, look through your drives on your computer, hard drives, and see just how much content you have there, and move it to a folder. And if you do nothing else with it for like 30 days, 90 days, you've taken the first step and you've helped to collect it in one place. That content alone is probably enough to get you several months worth of content, even if you don't create anything new. So start with where you are, start with what you have, and see how far you can get with that.
Yeah.
I have an old person question.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I download something on the computer or into a folder, like does some crazy man in a basement in Russia now have all my information?
If you download it into a folder, so if you're thinking maybe like on Google Drive, no.
Okay.
No, I mean, hacking is a thing, but no, if you put it on a drive, they're encrypted, they're safe, and I can give you some resources as well, some that I use that have like triple encryption, so, yeah.
We use bots, but like that's a real concern for the clients.
Correct.
Medical settings where they check and double check what you're opening or what you're downloading.
If I ever did it, I would never do it on No. But I would be worried because, I'm not so computer savvy that I would know if somebody was able to access something.
12 years ago, I asked the person who was helping me, I said, why when you have the cursor on a line, does it change color? I didn't know what a link was. Okay? So that's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Lisa, you were telling?
Probably similar to her time question. I wonder about conflict with what we're doing right now. Like, I work with the federal government right now, and we have so many rules, and I've gotten many emails just about the Hatch Act this past week, about mixing government and our work a lot. So there's so many different rules and regulations and ethics and requirements. But I also think I'm less than a decade from being able to retire. So what do I want to do next? So how do you balance what you're doing now and what you want to be doing after your day job right now? And starting to build kind of without going too deep in that you run into any conflict with rules and regs in current place.
Right, that's a really great question.
It is a great question.
Yeah, so the question is, how do you balance the rules and regulations of your day job with your dream? So it reminds me of this book, and I believe the title is Stuck Between Your Dream and Your Day Job, something along those lines. And I say, when you think about your dream, you're building it and take one step at a time, right? So it's a planning process. So you can start with the planning process because there's generally no conflict there, right? If you feel that it is a conflict with your job and you trust that you can have a conversation with your supervisor about like, this is what I desire to do without being an issue for you, then I say do that. Approach them and say, I want to do X, Y, and Z. Will this
become an issue. So you can approach it early on. That's one way to go about it. But there are so many people right now that are in the same boat. They're starting creating these brands, and it's really hard for organizations to regulate that, right? Because we're just in a different time, we're in a different space, and we want to have a career that we feel passionate about. And so it's really hard. I think about it because I have a background in IO psychology, so I think about, how many people I've run into that have been there. And if you're in the right workplace, they will support you. That's what I've always believed. If it's the right place for you, they will support you.
So sadly.
I know, we're at time.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
It's been great.
Yeah, so thank you for all the presenters today. I just want to take a moment to just thank also the people that helped to put all of this together. Thank you, Deshaun, for audio-visual work. Thank you, Mentally Balanced Media, for all the emails and getting all of this set up. Becky Porter, thank you just for introducing us to this space. This is a lovely space. Thank you so much for that. And everybody on the PDC who's helped to virtually moderate, and everybody here, thank you so much for your participation in making this happen. So then the fundraiser.